Hello everybody, welcome to another Woodworking Wisdom. Today we are going to be looking at pyrography. We're in our craft workshop, so in here pyrography is going to be one of the things that we do. We're also going to look at the scroll saws. We've got a little bit of carving we can do, and we're also going to look at all sorts of different finishes and ways that we can bring some of these projects together. So we might do a little puzzle with a bit of pyro on it, or carvings enhanced with pyrography and stuff like that. So today we're just going to go through the basics. We're going to go through a little bit of troubleshooting, a few of the kind of common problems that we get when we first start out in this in any new hobby. But this will give you a good head start, a good way to get into it, and hopefully will give you a little shortcut into producing some really nice pieces of work. So we've got three different types of unit we're going to look at today. Or sorry, two types of unit, but three different versions of it. We're going to start off with a solid point, and these are really nice a nice way to get into the craft. So this is our solid point pen. Sorry, it's not on at the moment, so I can touch this end. This will get hot when we plug it in. But best practice, we won't touch that. This is a non-variable unit, so that means that the temperature stays the same right the way through, and we call it a solid point because it has this solid point on the end. If we have a quick look at camera 3 here, you can see this one has little concentric circles. So this, I would say, is almost like an iron. It's like a brand rather than a tip. And we'll go through this in a moment. We'll show you how we can use these. Here's another tip here. If we just stay on that angle there, Craig, it's lovely. This is the one that comes in the machine when we get it, or in the tool when we get it. This is a skew tip. Okay, you can see that skewed angle on the end there, a bit like the skew chisels in wood turning. Okay, that's used up on its tip to kind of cut into the wood. Alright, whereas this one is more like a brand, and we'll show you that in just a second. They do take a long time to heat up, but let me just turn that one on. I'll put him on his stand here, and while we're chatting, that will just be warming up. Okay, so let me move that one to one side. So like I say, they're really affordable, these. All of those tips are interchangeable. I've got a little bag of tips here. Okay, all different shapes on these, different kind of profiles on them. We've got one here that's a bit like a football. You can have different shapes like triangles and stuff like that. So these are really nice ways to build up a pattern. Okay. This one should be coming up to temperature soon, so as soon as that happens we'll show you how that works. Like I say, really affordable, and these are a really good way to kind of, if you wanted to dabble in pyrography, if you wanted to just give it a go and see if you enjoy it, this is a great way to get started. Let's see if this is up to heat. We're going to test them on here. Okay. So head down on the piece of wood there. He's not quite there yet. We're just waiting for him to heat up, and like I say, it does take a few minutes. Perhaps one of the kind of downfalls of these solid point ones, you'll see in a moment when we get our wire tips going, that will really take seconds to heat up. Let's talk about the wire ones whilst we're waiting for that to warm up. This is our wire type pen. Okay, so you can see that nice thin wire. This is a tip I've made. He's really sharp, so I've just hit that flat with a hammer. I used a bit of abrasive just to put a kind of edge on that. So this will work up on edge, and it will work as a shader on its side. So this is what I use, probably 90% of the time is a tip like this. Okay, on a hot wire type. So I've got a question from Craig here.
How easy is it to change tips on both models, and is there a particular wire you need to use to make the tips on the other one?
So on these tips, these are threaded. So this is the solid point type. This is it's got a thread on the back of the tip. Okay, so this just screws in and out. Really easy, but again we have to wait for that to heat up, to cool down properly before you remove that tip. Okay, use a pair of pliers or something like that, but I would give it a good 5 minutes before even considering touching this thing. Okay, otherwise you're just going to get a burn on your finger. So this is threaded, really easy. We just twist that tip, pull it out, and then the other one goes in, and we screw that in. Just nip it in nice and tight so it's not rattling around. Okay, now these ones here, they're all very slightly different. Model to model. Our ANTEX fire writer, we've just got a couple of little screws on top here. Okay, so just undo these ones. They will back off and release this wire out of these two little barrels on the front there. Okay, and then that just slides out. The wire is nichrome. A mix between nickel and chromium. It is a resistance wire, so when the electricity passes through this, it heats up because it's resisting the electric going through, and that's where it generates the heat, much like an element on a light bulb or you know, something like that. This should be there now. Fingers crossed. We'll show you how this works. So I'm going to pick up on that little dot I've already done because I've already made a little mess there. So I'm just going to roll that onto there, and I can see the smoke. That's a good sign. Okay, so we've got our little concentric circles. Let's start to build up a little pattern. Okay, so we're just putting these circles next to each other, and where the curves kind of butt up against each other, we're going to start to produce a nice little pattern. I've missed a little bit on that one, so I'm just going to roll that in. Okay, and you can see you can really quickly produce something that looks quite nice. Alright, this is a lovely little pattern. I do this one quite a lot, and this would be really good for, you know, texturing your turnings, for just putting little decorations. You could do borders around things, and these work really well with creams and stuff, which we will get onto in later videos. Bringing a texture like this allows us to you know, rub creams in there, change the colors of things, so that's something we're going to look at along the line. So another question from Craig.
What wood are you using there, and are some woods better than others?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question that. So this is a piece of tulip. Okay, this is fairly uniform across the grain. It kind of lends itself to pyrography. Probably easier to talk about the ones we want to avoid rather than the you know, ones that are good, because there's not much you cannot burn on. Things like pine have a high resin content, and the yearly growth on them, you get that hard and soft layers through the grain, and that what happens is the pen tends to follow that, and you will end up with lots of little kind of dots. Okay, we're gonna look at that in a moment. I'm just going to turn that one off so I don't burn my elbow on it. So that's the one side. Things like cedar also have a lot of resin. It's not going to cause too much problems, but you have to keep brushing that resin off of your tips. Otherwise that kind of bakes on there, and it stops the heat from transferring straight onto the piece of timber. Ones that are really good for burning are your sycamore. That's the one I tend to use mostly. Lime is very good, so things that are good for carving are really good for pyrography, because we're looking for the same kind of grain structure and things like that. So sycamore, lime. The fruit woods are very nice and also have that lovely kind of rich colour to them. If you're not looking for something quite as white or something that doesn't give as big a contrast, I like using yew. There's, you can burn on loads of stuff. You can burn on leather, on cork, so little cork coasters and things like that would be really good project blanks. Okay. What I would say, if you're looking for project blanks, for pieces of wood to burn on, sometimes, and we get a lot of our old customers asking, where can we get wood from? Where can we get this and that? We're spoilt in here. We get really nice wood. We've got a couple of really good suppliers, and we've got all the machinery to be able to process that. So we've got the planer thicknessers, the big table saws. So I'm really spoilt. I would say if you're looking for a quick, easy project blank, you can just pick up on the high street. It'd be things like breadboards. They're usually beech, laminated beech. Make sure you just sand those back, get rid of any finish that's on there before you start burning. Things like wooden spoons, serving utensils, all those sorts of things. Cork coasters, the big table mats and things like that. Really easy and just you can just go out and pick them up on the high street. You don't have to go to a specialist timber supplier or anything like that. But if you have got access to wood, just go for your sycamores, your limes, the fruit woods. All right, they're really good, really nice and stable across the grain. And I'm going to give you a little demonstration on this one. Like I say, this is a piece of tulip, but I'll show you where we get those. The blobbing we were talking about, where you get where the pen dips in and out of the grain, and we end up with little dots, and that's a very common problem that people get when they first start up in pyrography. So let's see if we can address that. I'm going to my my fire writer now. This is the ANTEX fire writer. That's the box. Okay. Really easy to control this one. We've got a switch on the back, and you should see the little eye light up on the fire writer there. Okay, so that's your on and off switch. So the little dot above the eye is lit up, and we've got here a variable temperature. We've got that little dial there, so we can bring that temperature up and down. We're not fixed like we were with the solid point one. And that variable temperature will give you really subtle differences in shading and things like that. And if we're working on, say, I did a project recently on quite a wet piece of oak, a massive piece, and you have to really bring the temperature up for that even to make a mark in that. Whereas if you've got a nice seasoned piece of timber like this, it's going to burn a lot more readily, so you can drop the temperature down. And it's nice to have that finite control on it. Alright, I'm going to start around about 7, see how that works for me, and I can always tweak it as we go. Okay, so that's the fire writer. It is the wire type. I tend to tuck my cable into my elbow like that, so it's not dragging on the back here. And let's come on to our camera 2 there, Craig. Thank you. Let's just center up on that. So this is the sharp tip I was talking about. Okay, lovely, thank you. So you can see in profile how sharp that is. Okay, nice and flat on one side and sharp on the other. Okay, so let's have a little go at some burning. I'm going to put this on edge, on its side. And it should, if I press down, you should see, let's bring that temperature up a little bit. You should just see where we're kind of stopping and starting, and we're getting these little kind of spots. Okay, I'm just going to have a quick look for my tip. Excuse me for leaning over here. We've got my little wire tip here somewhere. If not, we can always cut another one. Okay. We can use it with this one. Just on top there, Craig, there should be some little, you see that pliers? Lovely. The snips, if we've got them. The snips there. Is there a pair of snips? No, not to worry. We'll go through with this one. So it will show the same principle. We've got our tip up on edge here, and I'm just going to drag it down nice and slow across the workpiece. Okay, and you can see the blobbing. Thanks, guys. So just searching for a pair of snips there. I'll make a little tip in a moment, but this is actually showing what we wanted to see. So it's dipping in and out of the grain. You can see where it kind of skips here and there, and it gives us this kind of blobby line. Okay, because we have those soft, you can see the grain running through this piece of timber, and where it's soft in patches, that's where the burner will dip in, or the tip will dip in. Okay, and we can alleviate that a little bit by coming off of the pressure. Okay, so softening our kind of stroke on our piece of timber. So nice gentle strokes, and that's burning the wood, but it's not dipping into that grain as much. Okay, you can see the quality of line is better. It's not perfect, but you can see that it's a bit better than what we got here with where we're using a lot of pressure. Okay, so to cut through that grain, let's use the kind of sharp edge of this, and we will see straight away the difference in the quality of the line. I usually sharpen one side more than the other, and I think it's that way up. So let's just drag that through here. Okay, and you can see just how much tidier that line is. Alright, we are kind of it does kind of railroad its way in, so if we want to make any curves, we need to kind of twist the pen as we go. So whilst this tip is really good for straight lines, it's not so good for your kind of curvy stuff. Or, you know, it will do a curve, but you have to really kind of encourage it and twist the pen as you come around. Okay, so we get that. You see how far that has to travel around just to make that curve. So let's have a look at a slightly different tip. Unlike the solid point, these heat up and cool down very quickly. Okay, I'm just going to pop this one out. Oh, it was there all along, right in front of me. So apologies for that. I've got my my round wire tip. It just disappeared into the texture on this this mat. So I'm using the back of the screwdriver just to pop that one out. Okay, I'm going to put that to one side in a visible place so I can grab it again in a minute. And look, we've got this round wire tip. This is the one that's going to do all of our kind of tight curves and things like that. Commonly called a writing tip. That's going in there, and I'm being careful not to touch the end here. I don't want to, you know, to burn myself. You could use a pair of pliers if you wanted to, if you've got a steady hand. And I'm just going to nip these in. Okay, so almost kind of finger tight if you want. And then just take them a little bit further. We don't want to over tighten these. Okay. The risk is that we'll tighten this so much, and it's on that thread, it's going to pop out the back here, and we'll do a little bit of damage to our pyrography pen. Okay, once that happens, you have to really reorder these little cuffs. Alright, because once that's pushed through, there's not the connection that you need. Alright, we want that nice connection. And coincidentally, if you're using a pen like this and you feel it kind of buzzing in your hand, that means that there's something wrong with the connection up here. So usually it means just nipping in one of these little flathead bolts. and that will stop it from buzzing. All right. So let's have a look at this writing type tip. So a couple of seconds for it to heat up, to come up to heat, and we get that same kind of blobbing with that. Again, let's just alleviate the pressure off of this. Quite often it's very natural when you're holding something like this in your hand. It's very natural reaction to kind of to press harder. If you're not getting a dark line, the natural thing your brain tells you to do is to push harder. Okay. With pyrography, it's a little bit different. We're not, the harder we push, we're not going to get a darker line. That is really by the speed of your stroke. So if I slow right down, you get a much darker marking. And likewise, if you speed up, you'll get a lighter line. So it's slowing down, and of course we've got our variable temperature, so we can drop that down. And that's going to give us some much more subtle burns. Okay, so what's this tip good for? You can do little circular shapes. I'm just going to drop my temperature down, and your temperature really is going to kind of correlate with how fast you work. Okay, I like to go kind of steady, and it's a little bit more predictable. If we just drop that temperature down a touch, we can always go back over things if we want to go darker, but you've got that little bit more control. If you touch on and this bursts into flames, then it's, you're running really hot. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, some of the textures that we do, we burn really hot with these pens. But general kind of the kind of art and illustrative stuff that I like to do is usually at a cooler temperature, giving me that little bit more control, allowing me to take my time. I know I'm not going to just touch on and you got a big mark. Okay, because again, this is it's quite a hard thing to take back off. Once it's burnt on there, you've only really can sand it back or plane it back, and then you're almost back to square one. Okay, so consider your projects, plan them out, and be confident when you're going to go and make those burnt marks. Okay, so I think that's enough for the kind of troubleshooting. Remember, if we want to cut through the line, if you're getting lots of these blobs, use that sharp tip to really cut through the grain. And if you want lots of changes of direction, then the writing tip is the one you want to go with. Okay, so you've got a question here.
Transferring an image onto your workpiece. Not everybody's as arty as you, and they've got a good eye for drawing and stuff. What's the best way to do it?
So, great timing. We've got this project here that Craig very kindly cut out on the bandsaw for us. This is our common carp. Okay, you can see the shape there. I'm going to just bring him around this way so you get a good idea of the shape. And I've printed off the actual image. And a really simple way to transfer this on is to use a bit of this carbon paper. Okay, you can get this online. It's fairly cheap. You can see, it is reusable. It's not a one-time thing. We've got all sorts of leaves and a wolf's head, I think, on there. But that goes in between our project. So we've got our template printed off. And that goes between our project blank and our template. Alright, shiny side down. You can see there's a slight difference. There's a kind of more matte side and a shiny side. We want that shiny side down on our project. That's where all the kind of carbon or graphite or whatever it is you're using is. Otherwise, we're just going to transfer our image onto the bottom of our template. Okay. Now I've done a fair bit of this. I've done all the boring bit. I've done all the scales and all that, just to kind of chivvy us along. The fins have marked out. I've just left this fin here and the head to do, so you get an idea of how it works. So like I say, shiny side down between our project blank and our template. Let's put that there. And I'm just going to use a pencil to transfer this on. You could use a biro. A lot of people like to use kind of red biro so they can see where they've been. But we're just going to follow these lines. Okay. Going to bring that line in there. And turn your project around. Don't sit there uncomfortably. Try and, turn the project, make it work for you so you're at your comfortable working position. Just putting this information around the eyes here. And we're really just following lines. Okay, so it's as easy as kind of tracing or something like that. Let's get these lips in here. And he's got a kind of a whisker. Another one there. So let's have a little peek at what we've done. Okay, so you can see that eye's gone on there. We've got the gill, the information around the back of the gill there. Just going to put these little folds in, but we're not putting in every tiny detail. Okay, we don't want all that carbon sitting on our piece of timber. It's just going to be more stuff to clean up at the end. So we can see that there. Just going to come round on this line, top line of the fin, and then follow these lines along. On the back end of the fin here, it's almost kind of feathered, so I'm not going to put a hard line in there. I'm going to leave that open, and we're going to do that with our pyrography pen with the shading. Okay, let's have another little peek, see where we're at, see if we're good to go. And I usually just give it a bit of a few little peeks, make sure we're happy that everything's on there. Missed a line through here, and that's good. What I would say is make sure you're confident you've got all that information on there before you remove your template, because if you missed a bit, it is quite hard to relocate on this. This one we wouldn't have so much problem because the template actually follows the shape of this piece of timber. But if you can imagine this is on a square board, it can be hard to get that just right, get it back to where you had it. So there's our carp, a common carp I should say, I'll get corrected. He's all ready to go. Alright, so let's lose that. I've just double checked we've not forgotten anything. He looks nice, so let's just take this off. And we can put that to the side as a reference, because like I say, I've not put all of that detail on this fish. We don't want all that carbon on the surface, so we're going back in. I'm going to change my tip over from our writing tip back to the sharp one. Like I say, I do 90% of what I do with that sharp tip. It's a very versatile thing. Much like the spoon tips, if you're, if you've done this before, it's good up on edge, get that really crisp line, and we can do shading with it flat on its side. So nice and versatile, we don't have to keep swapping out. If you find this a bit frustrating, or you have trouble with your hands or anything like that, you can get spare pens so you don't have to keep swapping over. ANTEX also do a little a switcher, so you can have two pens going straight into there, and you can just switch from nib to nib. It's literally a flick of a switch. Alright, so sharp tip. We've got our project. I'm tucking my little wire in my elbow there, and we're going to get straight in and do some of these lines. I'm going to start up at the head here. Let's move that back into shot. Lovely. And I want to show you how this really kind of cuts into the piece of timber. Just bringing my temperature up again, and we're going to cut in here, and it is a cut. It's cutting into the timber. All right, and this is going to really stand out when you see this thing from a distance. You know, when you burn on the surface, your eye will pick up the color, but actually when we cut into it like this, it changes the way the light hits it, and it really, you know, your eye's picking up that little bit more information, and they can be really bold lines that you'll see from a long way out. I'm not perfectly following my lines, okay. I kind of I think maybe things have shifted a little bit, and if you have a look on our template here, I don't know if the camera can pick up, I went off my pencil line there, so I've just dropped that information back down a little bit lower, and when I sand this off, that carbon paper marking is going to disappear, and we'll just be left with the burn. So I've got my template here, and I'm going to follow this tight little curve. Remember, we've got to twist that pen for that to happen. Okay. The eye, just blowing on the end there to cool it down on that initial touch. Okay. When we come away from our project, the tip of this heats up because it's got nothing conducting the heat away, so it tends to get a little bit hotter, and that first touch is really important. We don't want to leave a big scorch mark when we touch on. So again, just blowing on there to cool the tip ever so slightly, and I'm just using this tip in several positions to create that curve rather than swap back out to my writing tip. That's all black in there, so let's just fill that in, and there we go. So another question here from Craig.
Just a quick one. What temperature are you on there?
So I am on I'm on 8 here. I usually start around about 6 or 7 and creep it up or drop it down. It's really nice to have a spare bit of timber that's actually the same species, or even from the same plank as what you're working on. If you want to check temperatures and things like that first, I would always have a little piece of scrap. It's nice to have an idea of when you actually get burning, how the timber's going to react, because they can be vastly different, you know. If you're working on one project and then swapping onto another, like we were saying before, with different timbers, with different moisture contents and things like that, it's really going to change the temperature that you work at. I'm on 8 here, and that's just through kind of experience, through you know, starting the burn, thinking actually I want it a bit hotter than that, so let's bring the temperature up. I can work a bit faster that way. So we're on 8 here. Just carrying on with this kind of cutting in, and like I say, don't worry about sticking to the lines 100%. Don't think, oh no, I've come off my line, I've messed it up. But, you know, this is an art, it's a craft. No two fishes are the same, and no one's going to notice once this carbon it has been sanded off, which we'll sand this back after we're done. you've got no information to judge it against. There's no comparison. So just do your lines and be confident with where the lines are going. If you do come off the line, just gently bring it back in. Okay? Like I say, there's no, you can't get the pencil eraser out and rub this out. But I find if you're confident in the marks that you're making, you'll get a much better quality of line. And that quality of line is what shows. It's not the template, because again, we're sanding that away. I'm just referencing my picture here and looking at the detail around this mouth. Okay, so we've got a kind of lip that comes down here and kind of curves back around that away, and a whisker. Is this a whisker? What does a fish have on there? Is it a feeler or a whisker?
I think a technical is a barbule.
Barbule.
Yes.
There we go. So we've just done the barbules on the front there, right by his mouth. And this is a lovely little project. I'm looking forward to seeing this one done. And this is a really, a nice little hobby. It's not going to break the bank. It's really affordable and easy to get into, and very therapeutic. It's much like kind of painting and drawing. It's that slowing down and considering, what you're doing with your hand and eye coordination. All of these things have been proven to really be good for your well-being. To sit down and concentrate on something is a lovely thing. And at home, I do this in the kitchen. I have the radio on, and I really enjoy it. You kind of get lost in the work piece. You really, you're focused on something. You kind of lose yourself. You got your music going. You got a nice cup of tea or something. It's a really lovely little pastime. Again, nice bold cuts into this. Not being too fussy about my lines there. Not too worried about that. Obviously, if you're a perfectionist and you want to get it bang on, just take your time. This can be very precise. This is like using a craft knife. Okay, so if you're very much perfectionist, take your time, follow those lines bang on, and we'll get through it a little bit slower perhaps, but if that's the way you want to work, then that's good. I work a little bit slower and a little bit cooler, I think, than most of the other people I've seen who do this. And that's just so I can have that control on the line. So the scales. We've got quite a lot to do here. I just want to get started on these. I'm going to do a few of the scales, and I'm going to show you a little bit of texturing as well. So if I just build up a few of these scales, and then I can show you how we're going to texture this and make them look like they're kind of sat on top of each other. Okay, so they're kind of layered up across the body of the fish here. You can see the little wisps of smoke coming up. This, obviously we're burning wood. We're going to generate a little bit of smoke, but unless you're doing really heavy texturing, so something similar to that, which we did earlier, this tends to produce a lot more smoke than, say, what we're doing here. Okay, the heavy texturing when you're burning deep into the timber will will create a lot more smoke, and you know, almost to the point where you need to consider you know, where you're doing this. A well ventilated room, you don't want to be sat in the smoke. Okay, there are filters. You can get carbon air filters. We got a little craft air filter that we do, which has an option to put the carbon filters in it, and that will take away some of the very small particles of smoke. Okay, I tend to do this in the kitchen at home, and you know, I've never kind of produced so much smoke that everyone's having to, you know, evacuate the house or anything like that. It's actually quite a pleasant smell, I find, and everyone always sort of comes in and says, "Oh, that smells nice." But if you feel you're filling a room with smoke, you can either, you know, obviously we can open the windows. You can have a fan blowing away from the workpiece, so it's actually picking up that smoky air and taking it away from you towards an open window. Don't have it blowing towards you, because it will steal the heat out of the tips of these things. So yeah, smoke is not really a problem. Whenever I go to the shops, I always make sure I'm not sat under a fire alarm or anything like that. So, you know, worth considering, but it's not, you know, it's not going to affect. Sorry, you're not going to fill a room with smoke doing this. And we have workshops here where we have, you know, 6 people doing this at a time, and we've never set the fire alarm off yet. Touch wood. So, just want to build up a few of these scales. So we can show you a little bit on texturing, how we're going to use the side of this tip to create a nice texture, and we will play with the temperatures as well. I just want to get a few in a row so we can really kind of see how the texture works. And you hear that? Absolute silence in here. It's a really kind of quiet, contemplative hobby. I like to have the radio on when I'm working. So all I'm doing here is I'll just drop the temperature. Okay, we're going to use this flat side of the tip now. Okay, so we're going to lay it down and we're going to use that flat side. So we're going to start off, you know, where these scales kind of start, in the little kind of V where they kind of begin. Okay, so like down in here. And I'm going to put a couple of little spots on each one, suggesting that, you know, where the light's not reaching is at its deepest point. Let's get these going here, and don't do them all uniform. Let's have a couple of you know, a couple of little wonky ones. We don't want it looking unnatural. We're just going to start each of these with a couple of little spots here. Alright, now I'm going to drop that temperature down, and we're going to bring that out a little bit further. So we're going to bring that shading out a little bit further and working a little bit quicker. Just going to kind of soften that dark bit and kind of spread it along the edge of our scales. Is that picking up? We're seeing that. So it's really just a little texture to give these scales a little bit of depth. And once this is built up right across the fish here, that's going to give us a really nice, interesting look. And it's going to give it a little bit of realism, a little bit of depth. That's barely burning there, so let's just bring that temperature up. Okay, so another question here.
You mentioned a moment or two ago about kind of rubbing this back and sanding it back.
Yeah.
Why? Won't you lose what you've just put on there?
Yeah, so that's a good point. I would usually at this stage sand this back. Okay, so before we get to the shading and things, this would just have a very fine sanding back. So we're not stripping it back to the wood. I usually put on like a 400 grit, so we're not actually it's almost dressing the surface. We're not actually removing our burns we've made. That cutting tip has burnt beneath the surface. So when we sand that, it's not affecting the burn. That's all tucked under the surface. We're just sanding off that top layer, and that's going to remove this carbon off our carbon paper. Okay, that will get rid of that. Especially that Merkur sander with its extraction, it really pulls that away, and you don't get that kind of messy or kind of carbon in the grain. Okay, sometimes when you're sanding, if you're hand sanding or something like this, you can pick up this carbon, and with a timber like this, the grain will pick it up, and you'll have it will almost change colour. It will kind of go like a grey colour. So we want to avoid that. If we've got a random orbit sander that's going to pull that wood away, or even if you're on a sanding block, just bring up your nozzle of your Hoover or whatever it is extractor you're using, and just try and pull that away as you're sanding it. We don't want to rub that into the material. All right, because all this wood is porous. It has that open grain, and it will take on the kind of the muck from the carbon. All right, so I always sand that back. You'll see some people leave it on there, or they'll burn it so heavily that there's no trace of it left. It's completely gone. With my stuff, it kind of depends what style you go for. I like really clean lines and detail. So that's the way I go. It might be that you're just marking out like a frame, and you're going to completely burn that out. In that case, you won't need that sanding stage. But the way I like to present the work is kind of super clean and nice, defined lines. Okay, so that's a personal choice. You wouldn't have to sand this back if you didn't want to. Just make whatever it is you're making. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's a real good thing to remember. And sometimes striving for perfection will kind of stop you doing what you're actually doing. Let's just keep going through these projects and keep burning, keep throwing yourself at it. If it doesn't work, you can sand it back, or we'll start again with something else. But that process of making mistakes and learning from them is really what's going to kind of advance you through this. If if you're making a mistake and you're not happy with it, that's fine. That's put it to one side, take a break from it, and start with something else. But really try and kind of push through these projects. Okay, I think we've got how far are we in there? So we've got we've got our little scales coming along here. I think we'll do this. We'll get this completed right the way through for another time. Let's show you a little bit on shading, because although we've got a little bits of it here, we've actually got an opportunity along here to get some kind of longer fading strokes. You see where these fin is on the back. Okay, so we'll have a go at that. Going between 7 and 8 with the temperature, and let's just test that first on a little scrap. So that seems to be behaving itself. Again, using my reference here, we can see that this second one back is the dark one, so let's just start back here and start in with that kind of darker burn, and as we bring that forward, I'm keeping at the same speed here, and it's actually the wood conducting the heat out of the tip that's giving us that fade. Okay, so again, nice and dark at the start, and we'll just bring in that fade forward. I'm using my other hand to kind of steady this hand. Heel of my hand is sat flat on the workpiece, and this one is really just to kind of steady it. So as the wood pulls the heat out of the tip, it cools, and thus giving you a less of a burn, so you get that kind of faded look. Okay, if you wanted to go darker, just hang around a little bit in that area. Give the timber time to burn. Then we can always come back and dress this if we're not happy with how it looks first time round. With shading, I would say start at a low temperature, and you can always build it up. And once you get confident with it, it's quite an easy thing just to go through at your hotter temperature. Okay, but it's really getting used to how it behaves, and just find what works for you. There's no right or wrong. You know, we say all this stuff. There's some guidelines and some safety, but actually, you know, this is a creative thing. Do it the way you want to do it. Okay, so you can see we're starting to build up some texture and colour on that top fin. And so let's come back out onto our camera 2 there, Craig. So you can see we're starting to make some progress on this fishy. I think we're going to, this is going to be part of a sign. So we're going to have, Craig's going to make a little plaque to go under this, so it's going to be our gone fishing sign. Okay, so a little bit of a collaborative project. You know, we'll show you how these things can work with each other, how you know, two different disciplines can come together to make a really nice little object, and that's what we're going to be doing lots of in this workshop. We're going to be crossing from, you know, perhaps pyrography into scroll saws and back again, and see how all these kind of hobbies and stuff work together. So I've been Ben. This is a little taster of pyrography. Next week we've got tomorrow we've got Craig on the routing. He's going to be making us a little sign on here. We're going to be pushing this through. I'm going to do a bit more work onto this one through the week, and then next week we're going to bring it all together to make a lovely little sign. We've got Colin doing his turning. We're going to look at how the first bowl. Okay, so you know, really the kind of going back to basics and showing you how to, you know, how to turn your first bowl. So that's a lovely little project there as well. Okay, so thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week for another woodworking wisdom. I've been Ben. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you soon.